welcome back to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on Thursday, September 28th. It's also a great pleasure to be joined in our studio today by Kat Bryars, who is the executive director of Shires Housing. It's a non-for-profit housing development corporation that serves Bennington County and is headquartered in Bennington. And until fairly recently, Kat was a planning director at the Bennington County Regional Commission, where she helped develop housing policies and regulations for the organization's 17 member municipalities in southwestern Vermont. Kat, thank you for coming and making the time for this, and welcome to GNAT.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It has been a long time in the works.
The solutions to figuring a way out of the current situation we find ourselves in, with not enough affordable housing or workforce housing for the folks who are looking for it, is going to be an interesting problem to solve. And I know a lot of folks have been working hard at that already for quite a while. Mm-hmm. But before we kind of drill into that a little bit, I thought maybe you could tell us a little bit about Shires Housing.
Great, I'm happy to do that, thank you. So Shires Housing has been around for 35 years. It's actually nice when I look into it. I was born the same year that Shires Housing was born, so we are both 35 years old. So Shires Housing has, during that entire time and until today, is the nonprofit housing developer and manager in Bennington County. We steward over 400 units of housing in the county, and that serves over 1,200 members of our community, families, individuals, seniors. We run the gamut. We serve everybody in the community at all income levels. That said, we also have the unique mission of having targeted units to serve the lower income members of our community. So that means families earning less than 80% of area median income, which is quite a bit of our community. That's why one term that's taken off in recent years is workforce housing. What we're really talking about when we're talking about some lower income folks is, folks who are working at our coffee shop, at our retail store. It is the teacher who, with sometimes still surprisingly low incomes, they can feel even lower when you are, say, a single parent with a child or multiple children, and you find that the income that you're making actually does not afford you housing and everything else that you need to live, your transportation, your food, your utilities. And so Shires Housing is the entity in Bennington County to targetedly meet the need of that part of our community. And we serve people of all income levels as well. So we've got over 400 units of housing stretching from the town of Bennington up through Manchester. We can talk a little bit more about what specifically we have going on in Manchester. And we've got several projects that are ongoing in development right now that are really exciting. They're in Bennington, a mobile home rehab that has some zero energy, solar powered modular homes that are going to be serving specifically families exiting homelessness. And we have 2 projects in the works to serve folks in recovery who are looking to live in community to support their sobriety and kind of transition back into society at large, but do that through a community-based, mutually supportive process. So what we do at Shires is we meet the housing need. We also look for opportunities like the recovery housing, where we're taking the housing need and we're saying, what else can we do with this housing that we're providing? What other needs in the community that folks are having a hard time meeting can we step into? And it's really exciting work. I've now been with the organization since November.
So, as we all have heard many times now, housing is really short, affordable housing for workforce folks like you were describing there. How did we get here, do you think? I mean, what happened? I mean, it seems to me like, 10, 15, 20 years ago, you wanted to buy a house someplace, you had a range of options depending on your income or your availability. What happened since then to tighten that market so much that it's just so hard for people to find a house where it's convenient for them to get to work, or where they want to live?
That's the question, isn't it? Everybody's, because tied to, if we could just understand the problem of how we got here, we could identify the solution, right? What you really have with housing, you have a fundamental market failure, right? What is supposed to happen in the market is there is demand that goes up over time and supply increases to meet that demand. You have a fundamental market failure where we have this huge need for housing and yet it's not being met. So to your point, why? Why is that? And when you look over, there's just too many factors, and it's been a long time coming. There's been an underinvestment in housing stock, also in the underlying systems that you need to support housing, especially housing that's affordable, like wastewater infrastructure, water infrastructure. There's been an underinvestment in those things for a while, and at this point I'm talking, at a national scale. There are other fundamentals, like what's the thing that they don't make any more of? Land. And you can't build a home where you don't have land, and just simple land costs have been increasing gradually over time. On top of that piece of land, you layer on materials, you layer on the folks needed to build it, the workforce, and there's just been increasing scarcity of all of those elements. For anybody who's been paying attention, then that was a pre-existing trend, then we had COVID, and everybody in Vermont saw how overnight, the prices for our goods and the prices of homes in the housing stock just went through the roof. And they have not come back down to where they were before. A major contributing factor when you have all of those elements of scarcity, we do have zoning laws that further restrict where housing can and can't go. The intention behind land use planning and zoning is sound. I say that as myself. That is my area of expertise with a degree in urban planning, urban and regional planning. And I worked for 6 years, ending up being the director of planning at Bennington County Regional Commission. So if you want to blame somebody, blame me, I guess. But the intent of regional planning and land use planning is to have housing be developed where it's going to be most successful and where it's going to serve the most people and be efficient and not overtax, public investments. It is a market manipulation, though, to further restrict where housing can go. And so some of the most exciting planning work I think that's happening these days is where we're looking at our zoning regulations and realizing, are we over restricting housing that's so badly needed in areas where it does make sense, where in areas where we can take advantage of pre-existing infrastructure like roads and wastewater and potable water infrastructure, and the cost of adding new housing that should actually be incentivized rather than restricted. So the zoning has been, I think, recently historically a barrier, and I really see it as zoning gets relooked at and retuned to actually be a driver, an incentivizer of housing development happening in our historic villages and downtowns. But it's the question overall, there's no single silver bullet solution that is going to address the housing need. It is a macro problem. It is a housing crisis across the country, frankly. And so I would say for solutions, selfishly investing in nonprofit housing developer, which Shires is in our county, that is delivering housing targeted to the whole community, but also particularly the most economically vulnerable. We are able to do that. We're able to pull in resources through our main source of financing for the projects that we do, which is private equity, through banks, through tax credits. It's called low-income housing tax credits. we're able to pull in that equity from elsewhere and invest it into our communities as new housing units. So just in the past 5 years, we have built new and rehabbed over 110 new units of housing. And so we are doing that work. There's a lot of other people doing that work. I think it's important to support all aspects of the work. There's also, rentals and home ownership, and folks working on all fronts of developing additional housing in the county. Shires has done that. The thrust of our portfolio is rental apartments, but we also have done a number of shared equity home ownership projects, and there's other developers in the county doing that as well. So I think when you find an opportunity to develop housing, the community having a really clear vision and a realization that that should be a priority to support the community, and supporting that housing development is really important.
Well, let's zoom in a little bit on the North Shire and specifically in Manchester. We've been doing a series of pieces around some of the individual towns and kind of specifically looking at what are some of the issues that they're grappling with, zoning, wastewater, all the things you mentioned are parts of it. But here in Manchester, well, let's start with the 301 Depot Street project. You folks were involved in that. That would have provided, I think, 35 housing units there. I wonder, is there an alternative site that you guys are considering or looking at this point?
Well, it was disappointing, the recent decision that the town would not be moving forward with the proposal. The site is unique in that it is owned by the town, and that really presents a nice opportunity for the town to leverage power where they otherwise don't, right in the open market of privately owned land, to say, housing, especially workforce housing, is a priority for us. So that was what the town had done as of last December. They published an RFP to have developers propose, what they would like to do with the site. They did end up deciding to not move forward with that process. Shires had been, a candidate to move that forward. And I think their thinking is just coming from further analysis of what the opportunity, the highest and best opportunity for that site is. Shires remains interested in that site, and so if the town leadership, figures out that that our kind of affordable housing, workforce housing development on the site would be great, we're poised and ready to continue to move that forward. In the meantime, though, as they continue to evaluate Depot Street specifically, we are working with municipal leadership to see if there is another site. We really pursued Depot Street, Shires did, with our partners Evernorth, because it was flagged as a priority with the town, and we have a hunger, and the municipality does as well, to do a partnership project together so that Shires can be part of meeting the town's identified housing need. So right now, it doesn't appear that Depot Street is the site, so we are actively looking at some other sites to figure out what that site is. We've recently done 2 projects in Manchester, so this we're kind of thinking about as our 3rd project in Manchester in recent years, and we're looking for where that's going to be.
It must be hard, though, to find sites like that that are open and
it's a challenge,
not floodplains. I guess that was another issue that came up with that one.
Yep.
And where I guess the next door neighbors are going to be okay with it, because it seems like another part of the housing issue seems to be the NIMBY factor, the not in my backyard factor. It's like,
yeah,
everyone can agree that, boy, yeah, we need more affordable workforce housing, but
you see that.
Not in my backyard.
Yeah.
Is that really a big stumbling block or obstacle that you encounter when you're coming up with ideas or looking around for sites to build?
Absolutely it is. We do. You see it across communities. There's nothing unique about any one community that has a NIMBY issue. It really is all over. Where there does seem to sometimes be a disconnect between what some people can get behind in theory of there being this housing crisis, this housing need, and it being necessary, and then when it's in somebody's backyard, it changes people's perspectives. I think one of the most exciting ways that you see outside, I haven't seen it too much yet in our region, but you have these kind of counter movements that are yes in my backyard. And I think that that's one of the biggest keys to move those community conversations forward. An aspect of what happens when we think about NIMBYism, creating challenges for a project that's otherwise, desired by the community, you really have the folks who are against it show up and object to the project. Behind those handful of people that are at the meeting saying no, there's actually a lot more people who are in the community saying yes. And yes, we need this, and yes, we want this. And so building movements that are YIMBY, that are yes in my backyard, that are, some other communities have come up with some nice slogans. Neighbors for more neighbors is one that I think comes out of the Minneapolis area or Portland area. There's that kind of awareness and community building that can be brought to bear when you do have projects, because as the point you were making when you opened, it's not easy. If housing were easy to develop, we would not be facing the housing crisis that we're facing. It is hard. It is hard. It sometimes feels like a miracle when you have a piece of land that is well suited for housing become available at the right time, that a developer is poised and can bring the contractors and the financing to bear to make it happen. It's an opportunity that's not to be undervalued. It's really important to try and move those forward when we can, and so proactively building the pro-housing movement in any community is a really good place to start. I know Manchester has been trying to do that since last fall. There was the establishment of the Manchester Housing Task Force, which is tasked with doing several things, but I think one of them is building that intentional yes movement so that when projects do come up, that they can be supported. And there's a lot of investment that a municipality can make ahead of time proactively that encourages and facilitates housing development down the road. So if that is infrastructure investment, such as the sewer line expansion that's happening in town, or other projects. I know one of the projects of the Housing Task Force is to go out and identify where are those vacant pieces of property that could potentially be used for housing development in the future, and having the community itself, the municipality's leadership, identifying that proactively and then calling developers to the table. We've done some of this upfront work for you. That can make just a huge difference, and I think Manchester's really moving in a great direction to do what can be done to tee the housing market up well.
What about the short-term rental issue? I mean, that seems to be another one that just seems to be popping up everywhere at
you do hear a lot about it.
Airbnbs or some of the other organizations that do short-term rentals for people.
In communities that have really high levels of seasonal tourism, I think that there is evidence showing that short-term rentals are an issue. There are cases where housing that would otherwise, be more long-term housing for folks is used for short-term rental. My understanding, especially in my time as a regional planner working at the Regional Commission and fielding these kinds of questions from municipalities over the last few years, I look to data resources coming out of VHFA, so Vermont Housing Finance Agency. They have a lot of really bright data crunchers and thinkers up there, and they've looked into the short-term housing question. And one thing to have in mind about it, and this is just my latest understanding, is that very often you're not actually comparing apples to apples when you talk about how units of housing that are short-term rentals that would otherwise be year-round rentals. That there is something happening that's unique with short-term rentals, where if it's a room in somebody's house or an in-suite, the owners who are willing to do short-term rentals are not the same people necessarily who are willing to be landlords. So I think that actually is a pretty helpful insight, and to take a moment when certainly a lot of people want to get really upset about short-term rentals. There is a question there of, are we really saying, if these housing units weren't short-term rentals, would they really actually be on the market rentals involving a landlord? It doesn't. It sounds like at most, there's a portion of them that might be, and where it does seem like it's more concerning are in areas that have a lot of seasonal tourism, where short-term rentals are really high. So it's very possible that Manchester, with the seasonal tourism that's absolutely part of the local economy, has kind of passed the threshold to where thinking about restrictions of short-term rentals may be part of the housing solution. All of that said, I think that solutions that are oriented towards yes are going to be the best investments that we can make to address the housing crisis. So a lot of resources and thinking and goodwill can be poured into thinking about addressing the short-term rental issue such that it exists. If you took the same amount of passion and time and energy and put that into where can we develop new housing, workforce housing, rentals, home ownership opportunities, if we could take that energy and get it into the yes movement, I think that the community would see the payoff in new housing sooner than spending that same energy on the short-term rental front.
I did want to ask you about the homeless population that we've been hearing a lot about also. Across the state, I think there's roughly 1,200 or so folks who are still living right now in motels with the voucher program that began during the COVID pandemic. But that program is supposed to end next April. And I find myself wondering where are 1,200 or whatever people are going to find a place to live.
I mean, everyone in the housing community and beyond and affiliated communities is thinking about this question. The exciting news that I can say in my role now with Shires is that Shires is one of many organizations that is on the front lines of addressing the ongoing homelessness crisis that's been in our state now for many years, but also now this new crisis that we can actually see and quantify because of the motel voucher program, which is going to be winding down on its current timeline in April. It actually was supposed to end this fall, and it was extended through the winter because people realized just how catastrophic it could be heading into winter to not extend the program. So many of Shires' recent projects have actually been dedicated specifically to families exiting homelessness. So our most recently completed project is in Bennington. It's a partnership with the Bennington County Coalition for the Homeless, where we rehabbed 7 apartments and built 2 new apartments specifically for families, so not individuals, actual families with children, as transitional housing. So not a shelter, not an emergency shelter, but true transitional housing so that families can stabilize, and in an environment where it's so difficult to find long-term housing from a place of stability, find that longer-term housing and get into it. So that's been live since February. There is a waiting list. There is a huge need, and there are people in the community that are working on it. The mobile home construction that we're doing, we're rehabbing our mobile home park in Bennington and adding 7 zero energy ready, solar panel ready modular homes to the mobile home park. Those are going to be dedicated specifically to the homeless population, folks exiting homelessness. We're looking at expanding that to include a number of additional units because, to your point, what are folks doing about it? Shires Housing is on the front lines of actually getting housing lined up and matchmaking housing units to families exiting homelessness. The state, the legislature is absolutely engaged in this issue and introduced a number of new funding opportunities, one of which is the mobile home program, because when you look at cost per unit of housing, new mobile homes or modular homes are one of the least expensive ways to get people into really high quality, high efficiency homes. And so we're looking for opportunities to expand that. Even before, though, this recent iteration of the crisis, Shires is focused on meeting the needs of folks exiting homelessness. So at our Orchard Village Applegate property just a couple of years back, we rehabbed 15 units of housing that are specifically for those folks exiting homelessness. And it's actually a requirement now coming from the legislature that a third of all new leases that we as a nonprofit housing developer do are for families and individuals exiting homelessness. So we actually surpass the minimum requirement that the legislature has set as of June, July. We're actually coming in above those numbers because it is such a critical need. And what I'll say, kind of since you indicated we're wrapping up the conversation, I'm so grateful again that you've had me here today, because this fall I'm launching with Shires an awareness and a fundraising campaign, because for everybody who has been following the news and is aware of the housing crisis that's impacting our region, that's aware of the scale of the homelessness crisis that's impacting our region, and that with the winding down of the motel voucher program is really just reaching a critical moment over the next 6 months. Please support Shires Housing in continuing to do the great work that we've done. As I said, I believe earlier, over 115 units of housing just in the last 5 years that Shires has built new and rehabbed in our community. So that's actually more than a quarter of our entire portfolio. Shires has worked on and added new just in 5 years. That's actually an incredible recent track record of housing development. And the thing is, we need community support to be able to sustain that and grow that, actually accelerate it. When Shires does our work, we pull funding from the legislature, federal dollars, private equity. We draw that into our community, and the anchor money can come from the community that goes into pre-development costs to pull and secure that funding for the region. So for everybody who is watching and who is concerned about the homelessness crisis, the housing crisis, there is this wonderful opportunity now to get reacquainted with Shires Housing, as my friend Seth Bongartz, our representative who does such great work around raising awareness of the housing issue statewide and region-wide. He likes to talk about Shires Housing as one of the best kept secrets of Bennington County. Shires Housing has been doing this incredible work to meet such a critical need tied to the region's economic vitality, community vitality. We've been doing it for 35 years. We've been doing a great job, and we're now really for the first time in a major way asking the community to step in, thank us for the work that we do, and help us be in a position to accelerate it, continue to bring in those outside dollars to our region, and continue to build this movement to address these crises.
Is there a fundraising goal that you have? Is there a certain dollar amount you're seeking to get out of this fund drive?
Yes. Well, this is an annual fund that we're launching, and for our first year, we have an aggressive target, but I'm not shy about putting it out there. We want to raise $300,000. We have crunched the numbers. We've looked into the community, and we think we can do it. That's our initial goal, and what we really realized, though, we've always had an annual appeal that's been significant, but I would say modest given the need, given what Shires has provided to our region. And so this is the first of what's going to be a regular annual fund that we will do now every year moving forward to make that bigger ask of the community, to really give the community a chance to invest in Shires and what Shires is providing in the region.
But thank you, Kat Bryars, Executive Director for Shires Housing, for being with us today and sharing your insights on this very vexing and difficult issue. And good luck in your work.
Thank you for the time, and thank you always for focusing on such important issues in the region. I appreciate your work.